What is one thing that comes to mind when we hear the country Sweden? Is it the Viking era, midsummer, the green economy? Sweden is very distinct compared to other countries like the US. Firstly, I will cover the country overview, where I will briefly talk about important historical points in Sweden, important demographics, its current economy, and their well known traditions. Let's take a look at Sweden's most important historical points. As a quick introduction to Swedish history, Sweden was the land of the North German people. According to a YouTube video researched and created by B.J. Ranson, published in 2022, one of the most famous parts of Swedish history was the Viking Age, a fierce warrior culture that expanded across Europe. This was a critical time for the North German people because they expanded east and flourished in terms of their economy. In the 14th century, the Swedes joined other countries and became the Kalmar Union. By the 15th century, Sweden gained its independence due to cultural tensions. Sweden became a strong nation in terms of military and expansion, but eventually lost most of its power in the 17th century. By the 18th century, Sweden became neutral in every war. In 1995, Sweden joined the EU but refused to join NATO until just recently due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, according to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in 2022. Let's take a closer look during the 15th and 17th century because it was one of the most important times for Sweden. In 1523, Gustav I was a notable leader because under his reign, Sweden was able to move away from the Kalmar Union. After they gained their independence, Sweden prospered into the east and conquered several parts of Europe. Shortly after some time, Sweden's military expansion declined due to high economic costs, which led to losing many parts of their territory. As shown in the image on the left, the green areas were the regions that were once conquered by Gustav I. Today, we see the green regions were lost and now became independent countries like Finland, Estonia, and some parts became Russia and Germany, etc. Now that I've talked about Sweden's history, let's take a look at the second point, which is the demographics. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Sweden originally was homogeneous in terms of ethnic language and religion. Since World War II, there has been a rise in immigration from neighboring countries. In addition, there has been an increase in immigration due to asylum seekers. Since the 1980s, the number of people seeking refuge in Sweden had increased dramatically. According to Cosmosia Global, published in 2022, there are now nearly 200 languages that are spoken today, such as Finnish, Romanian, and Yiddish. In the early centuries, Lutheranism was a predominant religion and technically still is today. However, today we see people are now practicing other religions such as Greek Orthodox and Islam. Now that I've covered the history and current demographics, let's look at the third point, which is the economy. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the GDP is known to be one of the highest among other countries. On the other hand, citizens have to pay more in taxes where education, healthcare, and childcare are paid from these taxes. Sweden is market-oriented and mostly consists of privately owned enterprises where there has been less government intervention. Although Sweden is part of the European Union, they use the krona instead of the traditional euro. Let's dive deeper into the key drivers of Sweden's current account. First, let's take a look on Sweden's exports. On the right side, we see a majority of Sweden's exports come from neighboring countries like Germany, etc. Many other products that Sweden exports include wood products, precious metals, and industrial products. Now looking at Sweden's imports, we see Germany as one of Sweden's main suppliers. Interestingly, before the 1980s, petroleum was known to be a single most import in Sweden. However, today it now accounts for less than 5% of Sweden's total imports. Due to Sweden's sustainable policies and methods to move to a greener economy, Sweden imports engineering products and food products like coffee, tea, fish, and fruits. As mentioned before, Sweden has been moving towards a greener economy where they've been focusing on sustainable practices. According to an article written by Taylor Bridges published in 2021, the Swedish fashion industry has adopted a new framework called the circular economy, which enables a more efficient and sustainable, less wasteful system. Swedish brands adapted sustainable practices such as limiting wastewater and taking better garments to reduce waste. Now that I've covered the economic aspect, I will talk about my last point, which is the Swedish tradition and customs. Midsummer is one of the most popular Swedish traditions. Essentially, this is a time where people celebrate to welcome summertime. According to the Swedish press, published in 2022, families come together in a traditional feast and serve popular dishes such as sill, new potatoes and dill, and creamed dessert cakes. A big part of midsummer is everyone coming together in cities like Leksand, where they carry garlands and sing the national anthem. On the left, we see people join hands and dance around a tall wooden pole with two loops, which is known as the Swedish maypole. According to an article written by Nika S. Hippel, published in 2018, the maypole became a new part of the midsummer tradition where the pole is typically decorated in the spring on May 1st of every year, whereas midsummer is celebrated in June. Interestingly, it is believed that midsummer is a time for magic and using nature is rumored to have special powers. Lastly, we can see how locals are wearing traditional clothing where women wear flowy dresses and men wear black and white shirts, dancing to folktale music. To conclude, I have covered the general overview of Sweden, including the history, demographics, the economy, and well-known traditions. Once again, we can raise several questions about Sweden. What is midsummer and how is the economy like? We see how Sweden takes a different approach in different areas compared to countries like the US. For instance, they are taking substantial steps towards a greener economy, while the US is combating the issue at a much slower rate. Essentially, it is important to note how one's culture can be completely distinctive to another based on their approach to certain situations.